Wow, well, it's great to be addressing such a big room with so many people in it. Thank you to the Louisville Downtown Partnership, beautifully led and effectively led by Rebecca. And you're so lucky to have a leader like Mayor Greenberg, who, as the Beastie Boys would put it, is as cool as a cucumber in a hot tub sauce. I have a lot to tell you today. I have about half an hour. I have 246 slides, I believe, which is kind of normal for me. I can do it. I'm going to talk really fast. And this isn't just the last year or 2 years that I've been coming to Louisville. This is my arrival yesterday. I take pictures every time I show up, at least recently. But I've been coming here a lot. This is my credential slide, which is meant to impress you, but it's not as impressive as this, which is I've been a Kentucky Colonel for 10 years now. So, all right. and Jennifer Commissar Kern gave me a derby pin, so that's my other credential. I understand there's a new one this year. I'm happy if you have an extra, just throw it my way. This was back in May that I was brought here. I've probably been here 8 times over the last 20 years. Probably Louisville is the place where I spend most time, aside from my own home city of Boston. But this effort that I'm going to talk to you about today began in May of 2024 when the Urban Design Studio, led by Patrick Puma, brought me in. Let's hear it for Patrick. I know he's here today. My kind of guy riding a bicycle with a beer. Nothing better, except maybe a bourbon. And thank you, Rebecca, for I didn't realize that urban rhyme. I mean, I didn't think about the fact that urban rhymed with bourbon. But I'll have to use that moving forward. By the way, you'll know that you've reached, I want to thank everyone who's here today for supporting this organization. You'll know that you've reached your fundraising goals when we have an open bar at this event. So I gave a talk in 2024. Who was at that talk? Who's going to be hearing things again for a second time? Okay, not very many of you, that's good. And that actually brought me back because that talk and a conversation with Mayor Greenberg and others led to the decision to fund a walkability study, which is essentially a new street striping plan for the downtown and for Nulu. So that led to this lecture and this plan. And this plan was completed in November, and it is ready to go. We spent a lot of time. We spent more than a week here overall walking all of the streets in downtown and Nulu, getting to know them much better than we already did, getting to know their citizens, and enjoying all the pleasures that Louisville has to offer, including, of course, the hot brown. And you'll be pleased to know we did fund our own meals when we enjoyed it. So the plan is what I want to talk to you about today, and my talk today is called Towards a More Vibrant Downtown Louisville. And another way to say it would be going both ways in Louisville. Yeah, that's a joke. So in my book, Walkable City, I talk about the importance of places being walkable. I don't think you need me to tell you that walkable places are places where people want to be. But I define it in my general theory of walkability. I try to answer the question, how do you get people to walk? And I've talked about this before in Louisville, but never to a crowd even half this size. So I'm just excited to share it with more of you. Essentially, if people are going to make the choice to walk, particularly in America, where almost everyone has a car, and the car is there in the driveway between them and everything else, the walk has to be as good as the drive. And to do that, it has to do 4 things simultaneously. It has to be useful, it has to be safe, it has to be comfortable, and it has to be interesting. And we're going to go through each of these categories, but I should say that here, the safe walk, and with respect to the Police Chief Humphreys, I think he'd be the first to tell you, the real danger downtown is not crime, it's cars. And so that's what we look at as planners, and that's what we really need to stress in my talk today, so I'm saving it for the end. Our effort here, as I suggested, was a street safety design. But what's worth noting is that you're doing these 3 other things all pretty darn well. And Louisville is a city that I've been dying to get to as a planner, get a job in as a planner for at least 2 decades. Because the impression that my colleagues and I have had of Louisville all this time is that it's a city that's got everything going on except for the safety of its streets. And if you could fix that, you'd have the whole package. You'd have a truly walkable downtown. So I'm going to take you quickly through each of these categories, but we're going to land on safety and spend most of our time there. The useful walk is a story of planning and the history of the planning profession, and the fact that back in the 19th century, people were choking on the soot from the dark satanic mills, and the planners said, hey, let's move the housing away from the factories. And they did that. And when they did that, lifespans increased immediately and dramatically. And we like to say that the planners were hailed as heroes, and they've been trying to repeat that experience ever since. So you have the onset of Euclidean zoning, large lot single-use zoning, which split the landscape into large areas of single use. Of course, this is completely unwalkable because nothing different is anywhere near where you are. The most walkable places don't have blobs, they have confetti, right? They have finely mixed grain of uses. I was an art history major. They say that wasn't the most lucrative choice, but I can say you don't want a Rothko in your zoning, you want a Syrah. Syrah was the pointillist, right? That's the goal. And this gets us to the fundamental new urbanist conversation. I've been a new urbanist since we founded the Congress back in 1993. The fundamental new urbanist conversation is basically there's only two tested ways to make community that we've really tested by the thousands. One is the traditional neighborhood, defined as being compact, diverse, and walkable. And the other is sprawl, clearly not compact, not diverse. And look at this aerial. You can see very few of the streets actually go anywhere. They're loops and cul-de-sacs. So the few streets that do carry traffic become noxious. And you're actually 300% more likely to be killed in this environment than you are in a traditional neighborhood as a pedestrian. So it's fun to break sprawl down into its constituent parts, the places where you only live, where you only work, where you only shop, the part we forgot to count when we separated everything from everything else. This is not Photoshop, this is LA. But the idea that if everything is separated and reconnected only with automotive infrastructure, then your highway system grows and grows. And I always tell people, for many, this is the American dream. The house with nothing but other houses around it. But if that's your dream, then this is going to be your nightmare, because you're going to be stuck in traffic moving from single use to single use. And the amount that we invest in our horizontal infrastructure so that you never have to wait more than one cycle at a light because it's so painful to be in this environment. This is also not Photoshop. And then it's stressful on families. The longer your commute, the more likely you are to be divorced. That's a fact. And then the epidemiologists who study this gave me this slide and said the reason why we have the first generation of Americans who are expected to live shorter lives than their parents is because it seems normal to drive, to park, to take the escalator to the gym, to get on the treadmill, to walk. Right? We've engineered out of existence the useful walk. So driving is really stressful and unpleasant. Being a pedestrian in these environments, these single-use downtowns can be even worse. So these are the two models. And when we talk about creating new communities, which we're doing all the time, we're working right now on a new downtown for Prospect nearby, we say it's the same stuff. We acknowledge it's places to live, work, shop, recreate, worship. But how big is it? How far apart is it? And do you have a nice network of small blocks and small streets connecting it all together? And of course, our downtowns in America, our pre-war downtowns, are that model. And the more you can make it that model, the more useful you can make it by mixing everything together, the more walkable it will be. And as mentioned, the key thing that's lacking or underrepresented in your downtowns is housing. And you're working on that, and you're wise to continue investing in that. So that's the first category, the useful walk. The next category is the comfortable walk, and that has to do with something a little sophisticated that we call a spatial definition. As planners, we try to make outdoor living rooms. It's great to climb a mountain and get a broad view, but actually what all animals seek, according to evolutionary biologists, all animals are seeking both prospect and refuge. And if you don't feel that your flanks are covered from attack, you actually don't feel comfortable in a place. So a plaza is only as good as its walls. A street is only as good as its buildings. What's the best ratio of height to width? Well, 3-to-1 is great. 1-to-1 is the Renaissance ideal. Beyond 1-to-6, you don't really feel enclosed anymore. And so, Salzburg, no one's doing shadow studies in Salzburg. It's delightful at 6-to-1. The opposite of Salzburg, of course, is Houston. This is an old picture of Houston. But it reminds us that it's the surface parking lot, as was mentioned, that's the principal villain in this attempt to have buildings that hug the street and create outdoor living rooms. You can put tables in it if you want. It's not going to change your experience. You know, this is Europe. Look at that outdoor living room in the middle of Madrid. Or, you know, Boston, where I'm from. The narrower the space, or the better the height to width ratio often, the more delightful the street is. I find your alleys, spend some time, but of course you've got great urban and suburban examples of lovely spatial definition throughout your city. Whiskey Alley is a favorite of mine, but just your typical street is close to that 1-to-1 ratio in the heart of your downtown, which makes for a really walkable, comfortable place. Next is the interesting walk, which has to do with signs of humanity. 1-to-1, as I noted, was the Renaissance ideal. This is a 1-to-1. This is downtown Grand Rapids, which is a great downtown, but no one wants to walk on this street that connects the two best hotels because, you know, when one side of the street is a parking deck and the other side is a conference facility, apparently designed in admiration for the parking deck. It's just boring, right? It's repetitive, horizontal, no action. Mayor Riley of Charleston, a friend of mine, mayor for 40 years, taught us that it only takes 20 feet of building to hide 200 feet of parking. And so you know, this is one of my favorites, the Chia Pet Garage, I call it, in South Beach, where I used to live. You know, every city, yours included, have parking lots that were built at the wrong time, that are up against the sidewalk, or maybe there's a building between the parking lot and the sidewalk and it looks like a parking lot. But the idea of putting crust of habitable space on your parking structures is something that's caught on here. But of course, your typical street, this isn't typical, but your typical street provides a lot of variety. West Main provides the most variety, the most beauty. I didn't know that stat, second to Soho in terms of, you know that your Victorian district south of downtown is the biggest in the country. It's the biggest, best collection of Victorian homes in the US, and we love visiting it when we're here. And then, of course, the other thing that's boring is blank walls, and you've done a great job, and you continue to do a great job here. You know, a lot of cities have murals. Yours are actually good. So thank you for doing that. So that's it. But now let's move on to the main category and the main reason why I'm here, which is the fact that we're experiencing a traffic violence epidemic in the US. You are 78% more likely to be killed by a car now than 15 years ago. And we don't have time to get into the reason, but let's just say that America is the most dangerous of the developed nations in terms of driving deaths. And then if you look at different cities, it's remarkable how different they are from each other, which is a factor of how much driving people are doing and how fast they're driving. So New York, 2.6 people killed per 100,000 per year. San Francisco, 3.0. Dallas, 13.9. Orlando, 14.8. That's bad, but you're even worse. So you've got some work to do. And it's a function, you know, I'm sure probably more of the crashes are out of downtown, but your downtown streets are quite high speed, as we'll be talking about, and they invite the kind of driving that is going to cause crashes and deaths. I found this car walking around Nulu, not sure if it crashed there or somewhere else and was just dumped on the street. So what can we do about this? And the principal thing we can do is control the speed of the vehicles, essentially create an environment in which cars will drive the speed limit. A car, as you can see, a car going 40 is 5 times as likely to kill you as a car going 20. So what can we do to get cars to simply drive the speed that we've marked? And by the way, that's if it hits you, but there's a much more greater likelihood of a car hitting you at those higher speeds because the braking distances are much longer when you're going faster, and your cone of vision narrows as you're going faster. So speed is so important, and we have this weird condition in America, unlike so much of the rest of the world, where the engineers were taught, maybe they still are, but they certainly were taught to design streets for speeds higher than the posted speed limit. The idea was that elbow room, that forgiveness made a street safer. We've now learned that all forgiveness causes is speeding. And so you want streets that essentially just tell people to go the speed that it's marked. When we don't do that, we have to take other measures, like here in Salt Lake City, part of my wife and one of my sons holding up flags to cross the street. I used to think this was pretty funny until I discovered Granville Island in Vancouver, where they have a better program. It's called the Grab a Brick program. Grab a brick, wave it around, make sure you make eye contact, put it back when you cross the street. But, you know, these are Canadians, so they're really nice. It's actually, the bricks are foam. They're foam bricks. Anyway, you know, you've got this speedy streetscapes throughout your downtown. And so the question is, how do we make downtown Louisville safe? And the answer is, and this is my presentation from, this part comes from my presentation of the plan that we've given you. But there's essentially 4 steps. Completing your two-way reversion, which, by the way, was started well before we got here, and which we can't take credit for. The conversation we had when I arrived a couple of years ago was, you've got this work that you're doing, but you don't have a comprehensive plan that organizes it all, that phases it, that's going to make it happen quickly. So that was our job, to do that. The second step I'll take you through is to remove lanes that are not demanded by traffic volume. You can remove them and not cause congestion. Third, what do we do with that extra asphalt? Well, we add parking lanes and we add bike lanes. And fourth, let's remove signals, which I'll explain why. Let's remove signals and replace them with always stop signs, which, by the way, is something you've also already started to do. So we're going to go through these one by one. Completing the two-way reversion. This is a story that I've been telling around the country and the world, really, for about 20 years. We've learned that one-way streets, multi-lane, not one lane, multi-lane one-way streets are extraordinarily dangerous because of the opportunity to jockey, because of the fact it feels like a highway. Just the travel behaviors on these roads are faster. They're also bad for business, and we learned that from this article that came out in 2009 by Alan Ehrenholt in Governing Magazine, where he told the story of Vancouver, Washington. Now, Vancouver had a multi-lane one-way Main Street. I got to get a better picture of this street. But they had a multi-lane one-way Main Street that they tried everything to make it thrive. It was doing badly. They tried the bricks, the berms, the banners, the bandstands, the bollards, and the balloons, and nothing brought this street back until they convinced the DOT to make it two-way. And when they did, the merchants said that visits to their stores doubled. So, well, that's interesting. There's a study here from Louisville that I've been showing all around, Louisville, I've got to pronounce it right, that I've been showing all around the world for a decade. You guys were among the first and the most comprehensive one-way conversion in the country. I mean, look at this. It's basically every street. You probably know that not too long ago, Brook and First were reverted to two-way travel, while Second and Third, south of downtown, right, were kept as one-way. The two-ways, car crashes went down 48% and crime went down 23%. On the one-ways, crashes went up and crime went up. Remarkably, traffic safety improved on Brook and First, even though traffic volume increased on those streets, 13 and 40% respectively. So higher volume, fewer crashes. Now, you would think that there'd be 100 studies like this. It's amazing how the studies have not been done. There's only a few others that you can find. This one happens to come from Israel. In Jerusalem, they studied hundreds of one-way and two-way streets and found that accident rates were clearly higher on one-way streets for all street classes and accident types, mid-block and at intersections. And then this study is from Canada, where they found in Ontario the injury rate was 2.5 times higher on one-way streets than on two-way streets. And by the way, 3 times higher for children from the poorest neighborhoods. So we've been doing this work for some time. It's convenient and instructive that one of our projects from not too long ago was New Albany, which you may remember. New Albany had an pretty much entirely one-way downtown. And we did this plan for them a number of years ago, and they sat on it for about 3 years because they were worried, particularly the police chief, the fire chief. They were losing that extra lane to stage a vehicle. Is this going to be bad? But after 3 years, they did the whole thing in one summer, thanks to community input as well as great leadership. And then we came back not long afterwards, and this is the police chief, Todd Bailey, who said that in his 28 years as a police officer, he's never seen a better scenario for public safety. Speeds have been reduced, crashes are down, and response times to call for service are better than they've ever been. So that's a very good example right nearby. This is a list from one of my books for sale outside, Walkable City Rules, where there are now about 100 cities that have started to or completed the reversion of their one-way networks. This is your current direction of flow in the downtown. You can see all the red streets are one-way streets. This is what our plan accomplishes over the next 5 years. And it will truly be remarkable. And by the way, when we say reversion, we do not mean this, where you just flip one lane. Because there's another issue, which is how many lanes are in the street, which gets to our second category, removing extra lanes. Now, this is Oklahoma City. I was called to Oklahoma City about 20 years ago because Prevention Magazine named them the worst city for pedestrians in the entire country. And the mayor said, what do we do? And I said, let's do a walkability study. And he said, what's that? And I said, I don't know, but we'll figure it out together. And we looked at the car counts in the downtown. And we saw that we know that a two-way, two-lane street with no left turn lanes can handle 10,000 cars a day. No one will argue this. And so we looked at the downtown car counts. I don't know if you can see it from your seat, but 3,000, 5,000, 6,800. And these were all 4 to 6 lane streets in the downtown, vastly oversized. So we said we have a mismatch between supply and demand of lanes and 4 lanes, and let's fix that. So as Devon Energy decided to build the tower you see at the bottom of this slide against the park, generating $200 million in tax increment for the downtown, they decided to rebuild all 40 blocks, with a few exceptions, of their downtown core, actually rebuild. My job was the curb-to-curb design. We were able to remove 1/3 of the travel lanes. We doubled the amount of on-street parking. We created a bike network where there was no bike network. So a typical street went from this to this, or from this to this, or from this to this. And, I say this is what you do when you have money, right? But not everyone has that kind of money. So I say, don't rebuild, restripe. No, we don't need any more of this. Although it turned out really well on market, but this is not what our plan proposes. Our plan is all about paint. And so you look at your counts downtown, and can you see this map? 4,200, 5,300, 800. And this shows you that your everything in orange, and the wider the more, there's been a serious decrease in the amount of traffic in your downtown streets. So they are now oversized. Anything that's blue is more than 10,000 cars per day, so it might need a 3rd lane. But everything that's not blue, actually, the traffic can easily be handled by 2 lanes of traffic. And then look at the lane counts: 3, 4, 5, 6. So your streets are vastly oversized. We know this number. And so these are all the streets which, with fewer lanes in them, will not be congested. And we don't recommend narrowing streets that will be congested. We only narrow streets that have extra lanes in them. So each of these streets, Market can lose a lane, 5th Street can lose a lane, Main Street can lose a lane, and that's the plan. So that's the second category. The third category, what do we do with the extra asphalt? We add parking and bike lanes. It's really important. Parallel parking, often misunderstood. It's an essential barrier of steel that protects the curb from moving vehicles. I used to think, okay, it's good to have, but how important is it? This is Fort Lauderdale, where we did a walkability study, and you can see you're allowed to park on the left side of the street during happy hour and not on the right side of the street. Our study fixed this. But this was happy hour on the left side of the street, and this was happy hour on the right side of the street. No one wants to sit and dine or stand or walk on a sidewalk that doesn't have some sort of protection against the curb. So that's one thing that we increase. And you can see here, what you're seeing is in red, and there's almost none of it, are places where parking is going away. But in black is where parking is being added. So all those black lines are more parking that will be against the curb in your downtown, which the businesses will benefit from tremendously. And then the other thing we add is bike facilities, which I want to stress, you guys have already done a great job in adding bike lanes in other places and in downtown, and we just need to do more of it. This is the way to get people to bike, is to protect the bike lanes, to pull the parking off the curb, like you see on Market Street. So you have that barrier of steel between the driving vehicles and the bike lanes. This is Prospect Park West in Brooklyn. When they removed a lane from the road, pulled the cars off the curb, protected the what's called a cycle track, the number of cyclists tripled, speeding dropped precipitously, injury crashes dropped precipitously, yet just as many cars were getting through this facility after as before. And the same with the parallel streets. Because before, people were basically just speeding from red light to red light. So this being New York City, of course, there was a 6-year drawn-out lawsuit, but eventually the bike-hating NIMBY trolls grudgingly surrendered to reality. But I show this picture to remind us that This is the kind of low-stress network that everyone will use, but no one wants their daughter biking in the door zone. And there's another reason not to have door zone bike lanes, which is that people always put stuff in them, right? Trash cans. I collect these. If you have any, send them my way. Trash cans, dumpsters in the bike lane, the Uber who refuses to pull over to the curb sits in the bike lane, buses in the bike lane, vans unloading, police in the bike lane, bikes in the bike lane. There's always something in the bike lane. So we want our new bike lanes to be protected. And then there's sharrows, which get put in some of the darndest places, right? Who would feel safe on this road with a sharrow? And the studies showed that on busy streets, on busy high-volume streets, sharrows do not make the streets safer. I went on Twitter when I read that article and said, who's got a new sharrow symbol that's more accurate? And this one was sent my way. But the winner was Queen Anne Greenways, who made it the prayer row. Please don't hit me in the bike lane. So you've got some sharrows that I would not feel safe biking on, and I'm a pretty aggressive cyclist. We still see a place for sharrows, but just not in these big, wide, busy streets. So this is the current bicycle network. You can see it's okay, but these are pretty much unprotected bike lanes, except for Market now, which is missing from this diagram when this was made. But here's what's coming out of the plan. And you can see the blue streets are protected. So there's going to be a ton of protected bike lanes in this plan. And then finally, the last category, put always stops almost everywhere. Why? Well, we're very over-signaled in the U.S. This is not a roundabout signal. This is a artwork, but it calls our attention to the cost of these signals. And actually, one of the fears of the two-way reversion is that you're adding signal heads all over the place when you turn a one-way intersection into a two-way intersection, right? Except if you don't need the signal at all. And why would we get rid of the signals? Because it's safer to not have signals. This is the study, the landmark study that's been replicated in small ways, but this is a massive study where Pennsylvania changed their law for warrants, and they said you cannot have a signal anymore in Philadelphia if it doesn't meet a certain volume. They removed 472 signals. They collected a ton of data. Crashes dropped by 24%. Injury crashes dropped by 63%. Severe pedestrian injury crashes dropped by 68%. So one thing we've been doing wherever we work is to replace signals with stop signs. This is Albuquerque, where we recommended removing 17 signals. They took us up on 11 of them, and they bagged the signals and put up these stop signs, and there was a revolt because no one likes change. And so they went back and they bagged the stop signs, and there was a bigger revolt. Because what people realized was, after they'd experienced it both ways, they realized that they were getting through downtown faster as commuters with the stop signs. Because while they were going slow and pausing at every intersection, they were never sitting at a light waiting for it to change. So if you look at this headline from the news, yes, we're trying to reduce speeding, but we're also trying to make traffic flow more smoothly. And that's one thing that stop signs encourage. You've already started doing this in and around downtown or outside of downtown. This is your current signalization regime. So many signals. Our plan removes 34 of them, 34 sets of them in the downtown, which is a lot of signal heads you can sell to some other city. Take that money and put it into your street improvements. But you guys, again, you're already doing this. So right now you're probably aware it's 7th and 8th and Chestnut and Ali and a little bit of Liberty. You've got the signals have been replaced by stop signs, and the two-way travel around your new temporary bus hub is going to be hitting those streets soon, so you get a feeling for how that works. But that's everything. With the focus on safety, I think the plan will do it. That is the full collection of what makes for a safe, walkable downtown that's going to really, I think, change the game. You guys are already doing great. It's kind of hard to imagine what the downtown would be like with these significant changes, but when you've got that whole package, when you've got a downtown that is useful, comfortable, interesting, but also safe, it's going to be just amazing. So a number of people already said, the mayor said, and Rebecca said, something I always say, which is that the downtown's the part of the city that belongs to everybody. And that is absolutely true. Wherever you make your home, the downtown is yours too. And for that reason, investing in the downtown is the only place-based way to benefit all of your citizens at once. But it's more than that. Any relocation decision, whether it's a college graduate or a corporation, is made with an image of place in mind. That image is palpable, it's powerful, it's resolutely physical, and it's the image of the buildings, the streets, the squares, the cafes, and the social life that those places engender. And that image, in most cities, for better or for worse, is the downtown. So when you invest in your downtown, you're investing in the reputation of the city. You're investing in the part of the city that is the rising tide that will lift all ships. And when your downtown is even better than it already is, your city's reputation will be through the roof. And so I hope you will join me in continuing to support downtown's success. And that would be the end of my talk, except I always like to end with some resources. So yes, I'll be signing books out in the back. I hope you will read Walkable City, which is the book that's been most successful at communicating these issues to people who aren't planners. So it's really written for everybody. If you are a planner, if you are active in this space, even as an activist or someone who just wants to get the details right, this is the book you should have as well, called Walkable City Rules. I have a couple TED Talks. If you have friends who couldn't make it and want a 15-minute version of this, go to my name at TED.com, 2 TED Talks. Please support your urban design studio. And also, I just want to make a shout out to Streets for People, who is doing the good work here. They have a table, I think, here in Louisville. And if you look at the E, I did not see this before we made our logo, but our firm now, we're no longer Speck & Associates, we're Speck Dempsey, again, based in Boston. We have a website, speckdempsey.com, where you can find all of these resources that I told you about. That's my talk. Thank you for your support, and thank you for supporting this important change to your downtown.